Hello, my name's Elijah Wells, and today's review is Emerald Fennell's new movie, Wuthering Heights. The movie follows Catherine, who's portrayed by Margot Robbie, and of course Heathcliff, being portrayed by J.P. Lordy, who are both raised as siblings and of course have a romantic bond with each other. But however, when Catherine falls in love with Edgar in the movie, Edgar Linton, of course Heathcliff takes quite a lot of offence at it and seeks revenge, and pretty much goes around and stalking the Linton family, as well as getting Catherine's a lot of attention. Emerald Fennell is pretty much one of the most talked about directors that have emerged after the 2020s, particularly of her 2020 debut movie Promising Young Woman, which landed her Oscar for Best Original Screenplay, even though there was some criticism, particularly around its ending. And of course with the movie Saltburn, which came out 2 years later, which again garnered her somewhat more attention at best. Even if critics were somewhat positive about the movie, a lot of criticism again landed on the film's ending again. But this time, Wuthering Heights was going to be a lot different. Not just the producer of the two previous movies, Margot Robbie, was also going to star in this movie, but of course it has the rising star Jacob Elordi, and as well as Hong Cho, and of course the Nautilus star being Zaraz Ladeef, and of course the powerhouse performer that is Owen Cooper, who last year made a powerhouse performance with the Netflix series Adolescence. So it was pretty much safe to say that although it has a much bigger budget of $80 million, the movie unfortunately attracted quite a lot of attention and controversy before the lead up of its release. The casting of Heathcliff, being portrayed by Jacob Elordi and Owen Cooper, has garnered some controversy, particularly that is considered whitewashing. In the original novel by Emily Burnett, as Heathcliff is depicted as a dark-skinned gypsy, while of course Jacob Elordi and Owen Cooper are both white actors. And of course, the movies only picked up more and more controversy, particularly where it's going to lean more into the romantic and sexual elements of the novel, rather than the commentary around race and class, like the novel does depict quite a lot in the novel as well as previous adaptations, to the point where it was basically more of a fan fiction adaptation, rather than a more faithful adaptation of the Emily Burnett's critically acclaimed novels. If you're talking about like controversy like leading up to a film's release, it's definitely something not on the lines of say Snow White, where it was almost designed to like piss off everyone on the internet, as in to the point that the cast were pretty much throwing pot shots at the original film for no apparent reason, and pretty much everyone in the movie either somewhat deeply regretting the movie or were openly admit to being ashamed of it before it even came out. But on the other hand, for Wuthering Heights, despite the notable controversies like whitewashing and the leaning in on the more sexual elements of the novel rather than the more politically charged elements of it, I feel like it's definitely made by a creative that definitely cared and had a love for and interest in the books, despite the critical acclaim so far at the moment. Particularly it has two actors who again are very openly openly interested about this novel, rather than being dismissive out of, let's say, Rachel Ziegler with the Snow White films. I will give the movie credit that the movie is incredibly beautifully shot as well, particularly that is done on 35mm VistaVision. Like I've said in my previous review, that even though VistaVision did come back into the spotlight with films like One Battle After Another and The Brutalist, it is definitely becoming more and more of a trend on films not just being shot on film, but also being shot specifically on VistaVision. Like, of course, Emerald has a really keen eye on like these things. I think she shot her two previous movies on film as well, if I remember correctly, and she definitely does have a very keen eye on detail. Like, it's the movie's visuals are just very potent and in such a visceral detail. Like, it's definitely one of the most unabashedly colourful films I've definitely seen in a long while. It's definitely reminded me of the Stanley Kubrick movie Barry Lyndon, particularly of how very gorgeous the environments, how it was all shot, and how the environments, both in the interior of the ginormous mansion, and of course all these huts in Ireland, and of course it was just a very gorgeously shot movie, regardless if it was in an indoor settings and outdoor settings. And of course it was most likely with this movie it was shot with natural light, like with sunlight and with candles as well, similar to something like Barry Lyndon, even though the movie doesn't even though she doesn't state that in the film's influence, but I can somewhat see in the film's DNA a little bit. The designs in this movie, both in the costuming work and as well as the set decorations and production design of the movie, is again really it's something to marvel about. As in, particularly if we're talking about the house that both Heathcliff and Catherine do grow up in, as it becomes more and more dilapidated and more neglected, as more and more as film progresses, due to their father being a raging violent alcoholic who pretty much spends his money on alcoholism and gambling, pretty much almost similar to Barry Lyndon. And of course, when we go into the mansion of the Lintons, and it's definitely one of the most gorgeously pungent scenes. Like, it's just eye candy through and through. Like, quite a lot of reds, particularly in the corridors that lead to the bedrooms, and particularly at that shot where Heathcliff pretty much navigates through the corridors, and of course, it's just an incredibly marvellous scene. And like I haven't said in a long while, just the mise-en-scène of this movie, particularly on some of her previous work, like in Saltburn, like, it's just incredible. Like, she definitely understands mise-en-scène and its visual language, particularly how you use not just the characters in their own setting, but how you use the environment, and as well as the set decorations, and of course the building, how you use that as a character as well, and how you tell that story with not just the characters but the environment surrounding it. What I also do accommodate the movie quite a bit is definitely the music in this movie. And music in the score side of things is done by Anthony Willis, who is definitely somewhat new to the game. So much so he doesn't even appear to have his own Wikipedia page, which is again very interesting to say the least. But considering this is maybe his debut film he's done when it comes to compository stuff, it is definitely some really great music to be done here. And particularly, there are songs done by Charlie XCX, who came off like a couple of years ago with the phenomenally massive, both critically and commercially acclaimed album, Brat. And so much so that it even got a rare 10 out of 10 rating from Anthony Fantano. And the music in this movie is, again, particularly on Charlie's side of things, it's definitely really gorgeous. To the point, my favourite song from this movie is from Everywhere, which is everything. It was a song that plays during the credit scene, particularly as how it uses orchestra elements, to the point it feels like a very out-of-body experience, like very ethereal as well, which is I find really incredible. Particularly particularly her background is like a lot of like bubblegum pop, and definitely a little bit of some more aggressive new wave synth stuff, but it's mostly just bubblegum, more alternative pop or futuristic pop as it's known. Pretty much being made popular with her former collaborator Sophie with the album Oils of Every Pearl's Uninside, which she had collaborated before. Again, how she somewhat soothes up. What's also very interesting that she was approached to write one song of this album, but really liked the script so much that she pretty much wrote a whole album worth. We'll just hope it's going to be another 10 out of 10 from Fantana, because a lot of songs, particularly the opening song with John Cole from, I think, Velvet Underground, the song called I'm Gonna Die in This House, is again a pretty visceral, more industrial stuff like Nine Inch Nails. Unfortunately, it's not all sunshine and rainbows in the side of Wuthering Heights, so much so I definitely do have a lot of criticisms about the movie, like its over-reliance on sex, as in, I do understand the critique as the movie does do away from the commentary about race and class and pretty much leaning on the romantic elements of this movie. But there comes a point when it comes to something like sex where I feel like I do support sex scenes as long as it not just moves the movie forward, which again is a very debatable question if any sex scenes ever moved the movie forward, but again pretty much correlate the movie in a way that, looking back at it, we can see like, what was the point of that? Like, I swear there was like just the there was like that one sequence in the movie where it was pretty much mostly just sex scenes to a point. Like, I feel like, okay, is this just softcore porn at this point? Like, there was just this whole sequence of it. Like, I think there was someone on Letterboxd who essentially thought this movie was less of a faithful adaptation and more of like a sexually charged fan fiction. Which again, I feel that same sentiment as well. And another really big problem I had is just really just a lack of a payoff. Like, I think it may be due to, like, I've never really read the novels it was based on, but I never really knew or let alone understood what the characters were going to achieve in the first place. Like, what was their end game throughout the entire thing. To a point, I kind of understand the payoff just looking back on it, but the payoff just wasn't there in my opinion. Like, it's just how I get rewarded for it, but again, just what was the end game? Like, what the characters were going to set out to achieve? Like, I just never knew what was going to happen, and why should I care about these characters? Like, what they were going to set out to achieve. And of course, the one last big critique about this movie that I personally have is like the Emily Brunette novel is based on. It does touch a lot about like the commentary about race and class, particularly that Heathcliff was being depicted as a dark-skinned gypsy. Of course, the movie does water around just quite a bit. To a point, it's pretty much about class and just about it, like a forbidden romance, like the original novel. But it was just so watered down that it pretty much just brushes aside, like, oh, when we were rich, but due to our father's gambling and drunken issues, we're poor. Like, it never really explains it well, I guess, in like the novel, like it did. But I feel like it just brushed by it, like, oh yeah, we're poor. We'll just suppress it and just never talk about it again. It's just, I feel like if you're going to do something like that, like water down the commentary on what everyone loved the novel about, like what was the main purpose of it, I think, why are you going to adapt it in the first place? Do not get me wrong, Margot Robbie and Jake Lordy definitely are really they're doing their best in the movie, and definitely do give some really good performance in this movie, but I feel like the movie is just, why? It's just my one word review of this is just, why? Again, even though the movie is definitely very beautifully shot, the decoration and designs in this movie are definitely gorgeous, particularly on its costuming work, particularly the many dresses that Catherine wears throughout the movie. And of course, the music being done by Charlie XCX is again incredible and just very gorgeous. And definitely somewhat of a left turn to the more electronica, more bubbly-gummy stuff like in Brat. But I feel like the movie just somewhat fell apart in my opinion. Like, I feel like I just didn't really care about what was happening in front of me, and it felt like the movie just over-relied on sex to the point it pretty much dilutes the movie of the more interesting commentary about like class and race and where the characters stand on that issue and how you would project yourself in their scenario. It just becomes like almost like a fan fiction at best. It just left me feeling of being like, why should I care about this? Like, if you're not going to do that, then what's the point of making this adaptation? So even though I give him better of a doubt, like, of course Owen Cooper in his brief appearance in this movie is also great, as well as Charlotte Mellington as the young Charlotte is getting brilliant in this movie, as well as Hong Chow as Nellie, and even the underrated actor Sharit Latif, who is from the Amazon Prime series Nautilus, who is definitely a very underrated actor, is definitely doing his one of his best performances, even though he was more well known for his stuff on TV, being that, as well as his brief appearance in Penny Dreadful. But all in all, I just got this overall impression of being like, why? Like, why are you doing this? Why? It's like making, I don't know, Atrocity Expedition, but really shaving off all the controversy bits about the novel, or, I don't know, Satanic Versus anyone, but again, shaving off all the reasons why it was made very controversial. Again, I feel like this is like a really standard down adaptation of the original book, so for Wuthering Heights, it's a 6 out of 10 on this one. So, what do you think of Wuthering Heights? Let me know in the comments down below, like this video, subscribe to my channel. You can also follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Blue Sky and Threads, and this is Elijah Wells, and bye!